About today is there is nothing the president has talked about more, maybe beyond the renovations, than this new Air Force One that he has, the Qatari-gifted plane. He just started flying it last week. He's only taken it on a handful of trips, and he flew it to Turkey. But then he announced that he was sending the new plane ahead to a military base, and he would take the old Air Force One, which he has denigrated and said was, an old plane, out of date, embarrassing to meet with world leaders flying on that plane. He flew that back to Turkey from from Turkey to the United Kingdom, and there was even video of him walking from the old plane. We're showing that now, and getting on the new Air Force One. When he says it's just for troops to tour it, is that something that you buy?
It's a little hard to believe that this is the only reason that happened, for all of the reasons you suggested. My colleagues, I believe, are reporting, and my colleagues Tyler Pager and Sean McCreesh have been in Turkey covering this summit. And my colleagues are reporting, I believe, that the Secret Service had concerns about what could happen. And, I don't want to mischaracterize their reporting because this is still all developing, but it does raise questions about what exactly this new Air Force One, which was gifted by Qatar to the U.S. and then will be given to President Trump when he leaves, how equipped it is with the kind of defense systems that the current Air Force One is. This plane was rushed into circulation because President Trump wanted to fly on a new Air Force One because the two that he had commissioned during his first term weren't going to be ready for a variety of reasons. Some Boeing's fault, some an issue with how contracts were renegotiated. But when you rush something, when Jonathan and I reported in the Times that they were looking at this Qatari plane, lots of people told us they could not imagine a scenario where it could properly be fitted with its defense capabilities in time to protect a president, to do what Air Force One has to do. And so my question is, despite the hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars that were already spent to retrofit this plane for security, what remains? What stood out to me about today, other than the oddness of the two planes, is the pool report, as they were taking off from Turkey, said they were told to keep their blinds down. And Trump got asked about that on the new Air Force One today. And, at least in my experience, you have those blinds down when you are on a potentially dangerous flight, such as when presidents have gone into Iraq or when military air flight would go into Iraq during the war. The president said, no, there was no threat, but then said something about, well, yes, because, there's the bad people. And I think he used a slur as well, or a curse word. But, he seemed to be saying both things, Kaitlin. So I have to assume the reporting that there was a concern for safety is correct. And I also understand why he doesn't want to broadcast that. But this is a related complication of this war.
Yeah, and two things on that. The only time, you're right, that reporters have been asked to put the shades down, or they were required to, is when he went unknown into a war zone to meet with troops on Thanksgiving. He did in his first term. Other moments like that, obviously the reporter said that happened. The president said, well, he wasn't asked to put his window shade down on that flight from Turkey to the UK on the old plane. And, you mentioned the security concerns. This is what the president said just a week ago about the plane and its capabilities.
They just completed it. They made it appropriate for a president. That means the security and all of the different bells and whistles they put on. Very complex stuff. Frankly, we couldn't build a plane like this because we wouldn't be willing to spend the kind of money necessary. They spent top dollar.
It's just hard to see the president switching planes, especially, less than a week after he started flying on it. And doing that for anything other than a reason that would be quite serious. I mean, when he was asked about it earlier at the press conference, and if it had to do with security concerns, he brought up threats from Iran against his life.
That didn't seem to be a coincidence. And the one you asked about the health issue, I mean, the thing that we do say in the book is, among other parts of this that we wrote about, is just that whatever thin filter he once had in his life is often gone these days. I think we all see that in his public appearances. And that seemed like one of those moments where he was saying something that was clearly related to whatever was happening. There are threats on his life again from Iran. It isn't just because of this war. It dates back to when he ordered the drone strike against General Soleimani. And again, he has always been more hawkish about Iran than most of his current aides, certainly, and more than a lot of his base understood. But there is now this situation where there is something different being said by the U.S. government, sometimes hourly, but certainly daily or every few days. And the public has a right to understand exactly what is happening. The public doesn't necessarily have, there are understandable reasons why people who protect the president in a situation like what happened today, whatever actually was happening, that they're not going to say everything in real time. They may not even ever be able to say all of it. That's sort of a different issue, Kaitlin, to my mind. But what exactly is happening with this war, where things stand, planes that have disappeared, helicopters that have gone down, things have happened that the administration has not announced. It's only happened after, colleagues of mine or other outlets have reported on them. The public does have a right to know. That's